All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the case of Donald Harvey. And he's a pretty fascinating and disturbing figure, a serial killer who uh, operated within hospitals and preying on patients under his care. You sent us the Wikipedia article on him detailing his life and crimes. So let's kind of unpack what makes this case so compelling. Um, right off the bat, you see Harvey confessed to an unbelievable 87 murders, although only 37 were officially confirmed.
Yeah, it's a number that immediately raises questions. How could someone commit so many heinous acts undetected? And to understand that, I think we need to look at the man himself, his background, and the systems that unfortunately allowed his crimes to continue for so long.
Okay, so starting with the basics. Who was Donald Harvey? The article mentions he was born in 1952 and grew up in a small Kentucky town, had a difficult upbringing, dropping out of school and even attempting suicide twice, while serving briefly in the Air Force.
Yeah, his time in the Air Force is notable because that's when he first acknowledged his homosexuality. This was in the early 70s, a time when societal acceptance was far less prevalent. The article also details years of sexual abuse that he suffered at the hands of both an uncle and a neighbor. And while these factors don't provide a simple explanation for his later actions, they do offer some insight into the complex tapestry of his life.
It's a reminder that there's rarely a single clear-cut reason why someone becomes a serial killer. But in Harvey's case, his path took a really dark turn when he started working in hospitals as an orderly at just 18 years old.
Yeah, and an orderly's role involves assisting nurses and doctors with patient care. And so they have access to patients' rooms, medication, equipment,
Yeah.
which in Harvey's case tragically provided the means for his crimes. His first confessed murders occurred at Marymount Hospital in Kentucky over a 10-month period. He claimed his initial motive was to ease the pain of suffering patients. However, he later admitted to deriving pleasure from the act of killing itself, a chilling evolution in his mindset.
Yeah, that's a really unsettling shift, going from a warped sense of mercy to outright enjoyment of taking lives. This angel of death phenomenon is something that's always fascinated and disturbed me. Can you tell us a little bit more about what drives these individuals?
It's a complex psychological phenomenon. While on the surface they may present as caregivers, claiming to relieve suffering, there's often a deeper pathology at play. It's not simply about mercy, it's about control, a god complex, the perverse power of deciding who lives and dies. And in Harvey's case, his later admissions suggest that the act of killing became the driving force, eclipsing any distorted notion of compassion.
And to make matters worse, he didn't limit himself to just one method. The Wikipedia article describes a horrifying array of techniques that he used, from arsenic and cyanide poisoning to suffocation, pampering with ventilators, even injecting patients with hepatitis B. This lack of a consistent MO, combined with his position as an orderly, must have made him incredibly difficult to catch.
Absolutely. His methods were as varied as his victims, who ranged in age, race, and background. And this lack of a clear pattern allowed him to operate under the radar for far too long. It's truly a testament to investigative reporter Pat Minarson's tenacity that Harvey's crimes were ultimately exposed.
Yeah, the article mentions Manarson played a pivotal role in uncovering the truth. How did he manage to connect the dots where others had failed?
Well, Minarson's work was crucial. He relentlessly pursued the story, digging deeper into seemingly unrelated deaths. At various hospitals where Harvey had worked, he went beyond official reports, interviewing nurses and staff who had suspicions, but were often ignored or silenced due to the hierarchical structure of hospitals. And his persistence ultimately led to the break in the case when an autopsy on John Powell, one of Harvey's victims, revealed cyanide poisoning.
So that one autopsy, combined with Minarson's investigative work, finally brought Harvey's 17-year reign of terror to an end.
Yes, it was the catalyst that led investigators to focus on Harvey. But the true extent of his crimes only came to light after his arrest. To avoid the death penalty, his lawyer negotiated a plea deal in exchange for a full confession.
And that plea deal is where the numbers get even more confusing. He admitted to 37 murders, but confessed to possibly killing as many as 50. Why would he admit to more than the plea deal required?
Well, that's a question that continues to baffle those who studied his case. Some speculate it was a final act of control, a way to solidify his legacy as one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Others believe he may have inflated the number, seeking notoriety even as he faced life imprisonment.
It's hard to wrap your head around someone like Harvey, driven by such a dark compulsion.
hmm
He confessed to 37 murders, but claimed there could be more victims, possibly as many as 50. He took the lives of people who were already vulnerable, often in their final moments. What kind of impact did these crimes have on the families of the victims?
The ripple effect of Harvey's actions is immeasurable. Families were robbed of their loved ones, left with unanswered questions and a profound sense of injustice. The betrayal of trust is especially painful when it occurs within the healthcare system, a place where people seek healing and comfort. Imagine the anguish of discovering that your loved one's death wasn't due to illness or natural causes, but was a calculated act of murder by someone entrusted with their care. It's a trauma that can linger for years, even decades.
Yeah, the article mentions a few specific cases like that of John Powell, who was recovering from a motorcycle accident when Harvey poisoned him with cyanide. Are there other stories that highlight the devastating impact of his crimes?
Well, each victim had a story, a life cut short by Harvey's actions.
Yeah.
There was Helen Metzger, an elderly woman recovering from a stroke who Harvey suffocated with the pillow. There was Carl Howler, a middle aged man with heart problems who Harvey killed with an injection of arsenic. The list goes on, a grim catalog of lives stolen. It's important to remember that behind the statistics, behind the headlines, were real people with families, friends, and dreams.
It's heartbreaking to think about the collective loss caused by one person's actions, and to think he managed to evade detection for 17 years. What factors allowed him to operate for so long without raising suspicion?
Well, as we touched on earlier, his role as an orderly gave him a certain level of access and autonomy within the hospital setting. Orderlies are often seen as helpful, but less technically skilled than nurses or doctors, so their actions might not be scrutinized as closely. This allowed Harvey to move freely, administer medications, and interact with patients without raising too many red flags.
So his position provided a degree of cover, but what about the variety of methods he used? Wouldn't that have made it harder to establish a clear pattern?
Absolutely. That's another key factor that contributed to his prolonged period of undetected activity. He didn't stick to a single method, making it appear as if the deaths were due to a range of causes. Some were attributed to natural causes, others to complications from existing illnesses, further masking his involvement. It was a calculated approach designed to blend in with the everyday occurrences of a busy hospital.
And to think it took the persistence of an investigative reporter, someone outside the healthcare system, to finally piece it all together. It makes you wonder, were there any warning signs, any missed opportunities to stop him sooner?
Well, there were definitely instances where concerns were raised. The article mentions several nurses who had suspicions about Harvey, but were either ignored or discouraged from speaking up. There was a culture of hierarchy within the hospitals where nurses and lower level staff might hesitate to question a doctor's orders or express concerns about a colleague. This power dynamic, combined with a general reluctance to believe that someone in a caregiving role could be capable of such atrocities, created a perfect storm for Harvey to continue his crimes unchecked.
It's a chilling reminder that even in institutions meant to heal power structures and systemic issues can create blind spots that allow for abuse and misconduct.
Exactly. While we've made progress in terms of patient safety and reporting procedures, Harvey's case serves as a potent reminder of the need for ongoing vigilance and a culture that empowers everyone to speak up when they see something wrong.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the systemic factors that enabled Harvey's actions, but let's shift gears a little bit and delve into the plea deal. He confessed to 37 murders, but claimed to have killed possibly 50. What motivated him to admit to more than was necessary to secure the deal?
Well, it's a question that continues to fascinate and perplex criminologists. There's no easy answer, and we can only speculate about his motives. Some experts suggest it was a way for him to exert a final act of control, to inflate his body count and solidify his legacy as one of the deadliest serial killers in history. It's a chilling possibility, the notion that even in the face of life imprisonment, he sought to maintain a sense of power and notoriety.
That's a disturbing thought that the act of confessing to more murders was for him a twisted form of validation.
It's also possible that his confessions were in part a form of psychological release. Perhaps admitting to his crimes, even exaggerating the number, provided a sense of relief, a burden lifted, however perverse that may seem.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom the inner workings of someone like Harvey. But his actions and confessions raise important questions about the nature of evil, the allure of power, and the complexities of the human psyche.
His case is a stark reminder that evil can lurk beneath the surface of normalcy, even in those we entrust with the care of our most vulnerable loved ones. It's a reminder that vigilance, transparency, and open communication are essential to preventing such tragedies from happening again.
It's a sobering reality to confront, but a necessary one if we want to learn from the past and create a safer future.
And as we move into the final part of this deep dive, we'll explore those very questions. What lessons can be learned from the Donald Harvey case, and how can we create a more robust system that prioritizes patient safety and accountability within the healthcare system?
Yeah, it's difficult to grapple with a case like this. His crimes were such a profound violation of trust. committed against those most in need of care and compassion. As we move forward, how can we ensure that something like this never happens again? How do we learn from this dark chapter in medical history?
Well, that's a crucial question, and one that demands a really multifaceted approach. We can't just rely on catching individuals like Harvey. We need to create a system that makes it far more difficult for such crimes to occur in the first place.
So let's talk about solutions. What concrete steps can hospitals and healthcare systems take to safeguard patients?
Well, one critical area, I think, is strengthening background checks for all healthcare personnel. While many hospitals have implemented more rigorous screening processes since Harvey's time, there's always room for improvement. Thorough background checks, including criminal history, employment verification, and even psychological evaluations are essential.
That makes sense. But what about those already working within the system? How do we identify potential threats among those who've already passed initial screenings?
Yeah, that's a great point. Creating a culture of vigilance and open communication is absolutely paramount. It's about empowering staff at all levels to report any suspicious behavior, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it might seem. We need to move away from those hierarchical structures that often discourage nurses and other staff from voicing concerns.
Right. The article mentions that several nurses had suspicions about Harvey but were either ignored or silenced. How can we encourage people to come forward without fear of retribution?
Well, anonymous reporting systems are one very effective tool. These systems allow individuals to report concerns without revealing their identity, protecting them from potential retaliation. It's also crucial to have very clear protocols for investigating every report thoroughly and taking appropriate action when necessary.
So transparency and accountability are key.
Eh.
But what about the practical aspects of preventing someone like Harvey from accessing patients and medications?
Yeah, well, technology can play a significant role here. Many hospitals have implemented electronic systems to track medication dispensing and administration. These systems log, who accessed which medications, when, and for whom, creating a digital trail that can be reviewed for any irregularities.
It's like having a safety net, an extra layer of oversight. But technology can only do so much. What about the human element? How can we better equip healthcare professionals to identify potential warning signs?
I think education and training are absolutely essential. Medical and nursing schools should incorporate modules on the psychology of serial killers, particularly those who operate within healthcare settings. This can help future healthcare professionals recognize potential red flags, understand the motivations behind such crimes, and learn how to respond appropriately if they encounter suspicious behavior.
It's about equipping them with the knowledge and skills to not only provide excellent care, but also to be vigilant protectors of their patients' safety.
Exactly. And it's not just about identifying potential perpetrators either. It's also about fostering a culture of ethical decision-making and open dialogue. Healthcare professionals need to feel comfortable discussing those difficult situations, questioning those questionable practices, and advocating for their patients without fear of reprisal.
So it's about creating a collaborative environment where everyone, from orderlies to surgeons, is invested in patient safety and well-being.
Precisely. And it's an ongoing process. We need to continuously evaluate and improve our systems, adapt to new threats, and learn from every case no matter how difficult it is to revisit.
It's a heavy responsibility,
Yeah.
but one we owe to those who entrust their lives to our care. Donald Harvey's case is a stark reminder of the potential for darkness even in places meant for healing, but it also highlights the importance of vigilance, courage, and a commitment to constant improvement.
Absolutely. By implementing these robust safeguards, fostering that open communication, empowering those healthcare professionals to be those vigilant advocates for their patients, we can really strive to create a system where these tragedies are never repeated.
Well, thank you for guiding us through this really complex and disturbing case. It is a lot to process, but the insights we've gained are so invaluable in our understanding of how to prevent future tragedies. If you'd like to delve deeper into this topic, we encourage you to explore the resources listed in the show notes. And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay vigilant.